I'm up here today on this windy day at our main 6-acre site in Trumansburg after some pretty wild weather, and I thought I would film while I walked around for the first time looking at how the waterways have worked out after 2 inches of rain on top of a foot of snow that came very quickly, how water's moving, how water's being held, and the like. So come along if you're interested in seeing that. My plan is to start here at the high point of this landscape. This 6-acre parcel, which is roughly square-like, the highest point here is in the southwest corner, and it's around 885 feet of elevation. And we'll wander through from this high point of the watershed to the lowest and see how things reacted after this crazy amount of rain. This high point may be familiar to a lot of you that watch the channel. You can see a lot of the excavation material that was dumped here, wheelbarrow by wheelbarrow, back in August and September. And here's the larger pond system just beginning to take on some water, which is pretty darn exciting. It's probably about 3 feet depth in the very middle, right around in here. Didn't take on as much as I don't know what I expected, but 2 inches of rain out of nowhere. I think the watershed for this particular pond is not all that large yet, and so I'm going to be working on finding where water flows in different areas and see if I can't channel it to come back to feed into this pond. But for now, it's pretty neat to see water in here. We'll see how it stabilizes. I'm going to mark where the level is and how much does it expand or contract over the next little bit. We're still very far off from enough water in here to figure out where the overflow states will be. I think it might be here, might be over here, and then I can work on having the overflow shed gently through a sill to the next pond. Yeah, from here, ultimately the goal will be, the overflow will be meandering and wide and gentle and come into this area. It's just some older ponds that are a lot more stable in here. This one's a rough sketch, just harvesting topsoil to cap hugel mounds. Didn't take on much water, but these ponds, I mentioned this in another video, it's a whole series of little micro ponds that connect to one another and do some filtering work, and they're just about full. Pretty much to an overflow state. The overflow for this little series of micro ponds is right through here, and I see water in that overflow. But what's nice is it's not moving quickly. Whatever water did move, it certainly didn't move soil with it. And downslope, the next pond in the series is nice and still and relatively clear. This is definitely more of a channel than a pond. It's a little deep right here just to be a silt trap and catch, so we can harvest that silt in the dry season to cap these garden beds or to stool layer shrubs that are around. And you can see now we're coming into the first major valley in this system that sends water gently across to the north and then ultimately to the east, to the northeast corner of the property, which is way down over there, which has a pond that's completely full. Little spoiler alert, but nice and clear. That's the goal with all of this. If lots of water is going to move through the landscape in a very short order, I want to have enough distribution, enough interruptions, enough silt catches and pockets and filtration and vegetation that for the most part I don't see a lot of turbidity in the water. And I'm pretty pleased how little there is overall. This nursery block in here, which are 2 long hugel mounds, my friend Juan helped me put some fencing around, so really high value trees in there. It's turned into a rectilinear island. You can see here's a walkway with about 4 to 6 inches of standing water, not meant to be there year round, but to be a pulse storage. And again, that channel on the west side, which we filled with logs to interrupt and catch more silt and kind of filter the water as it goes. That hay bale wasn't necessarily supposed to be there. I think it fell in. I'll call it a filter. How's that? It's a good reason to make sure we only get organic things that we use for mulch and soil building. You can see the hay bale here, and then just down watershed of it, the water all of a sudden gets very warm and murky colored. I think there's a ton of nutrient leaching out of this hay into this right now. I'm not too concerned. It's not going to some swimming pond. This is basically a drainage channel for the landscape that I harvest silt from to build beds. So in some ways, having nutrient in it in the winter is not a big deal. But in the long run, I'm not trying to fill my waterways with compost and mulch. a little disconcerting. Both these beds are garlic, and seeing standing water that high up in that bed is a little bit less than ideal. Maybe an opportunity to do some shaving work and chase it down slope and let the level return to this drainage channel, or send it along to the south and around to a little higher in the drainage channel. I'll let it settle. I'll give it a few days. It's not like the garlic will drown in a day, but it's something to watch. Seeing crops next to water that high is not the absolute best unless they were more water-loving crops, which garlic is not. Here we've got garlic beds. These are all elephant garlic, planted quite early. Little bit sketchy whether or not they're just a little too high for how cold it will be getting, but we'll see. I'm not going to do anything for them at this point. And yeah, there's water in the walkway next to them, but it's much lower, so it's more just available water for the soil, but not necessarily soaking their roots in standing water. Pretty cool to see. This is the other irrigation pond that I documented this summer. I will link here to the first video in that series. You can watch that if you're interested in knowing some background. Not a lot of water in here. It's kind of to be expected. If you remember from the design of this, the idea was that this would catch excess water that's running through the main drainage channel. And so it was dug out this summer, but that diversion was not established. That might be some of the work I do today while the water is flowing. And that is to come back to this channel, which we've just been looking at. Goes back upslope through the hay bale to the very large pond, to the smaller ponds. All of that excess water, we're definitely in an overflow state, that this water, by and large, should be allowed to continue on northbound and ultimately down to small ponds at the lowest part of the property. What I think I might do today is work on blocking up this section so that more of the water is sent across through this ditch, which has some standing water in it, and see if I can't get that water to flow into this pond, get that to a full line, and figure out its overflow over there. Again, I'm looking at this overflow channel, this drainage channel, which is nicely vegetated. This was established a few years ago, and you can see little trickle. So water is moving. It is actively draining and leaving the landscape, or heading down slope. Pardon that hose. I'll clean that up at some point. So it is a missed opportunity. Every drop of water that goes past this turn, it's fine. It's going further that way, but it could be passively charging that 10,000-ish gallons worth of potential holding that's in a nice high point. If I'm reading this ditch correctly, I see a little bit of standing water in here. I then see, not dry, but there's no standing water here. So there's a fair bit of material that needs to come out. Probably 4 to 6 inches needs to be removed here. Certainly here, there's a good impediment. All of that soil can be put onto production beds right next door. More standing water, that's great. And then last is digging out and spreading the water so it can flow into there. Maybe I'll make a separate video documenting that, or just an update once that's done. Probably about an hour worth of digging. A little bit of a detour from that irrigation pond and working on getting overflow to aim towards it, to take a quick look at the drainage ditch that I established between our western property line and the property to the west of us, which is a conventional apple orchard. I talked about this in great detail in other videos, which I'll link to as well, but the water comes in right over here, comes to this channel. I'm sending it pretty assertively due north. All the soil that came out bermed on their side. So for crazy pulse flood states, it'll act as a real speed bump. And it seems to be shedding all the way to the north, just like I want it to. Really thrilled to see that this, it's a lot of labor to get that ditch installed, but it's just acting the way it should. From their property, where there's some ponds of water after that rain, the area where their water enters into our property, our stewardship, it's right around here. You can see a little running water right about there, boop, 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 and another little trickle over here. When I was digging the larger pond, I took maybe 10 or 15 wheelbarrow loads of subsoil and dump that over here to berm it up even more. But we do need to allow some of the water to come in. I might berm it a bit more, but all the water that's coming in, a few gallons a minute for sure, is all heading north. There's a little bit of bleed out here that's filtering through this berm and filling the secondary channel. So I may berm this up more, may block that water a bit more, but the channel itself is sending water many hundreds of yards to the north. I'm so thrilled to just see that working after all these years. I'm realizing that talking about all this water stuff, instead of working on this water stuff, I'm a little bit colder than I'd like to be. So I might pause here. This was the high end of the watershed at our 6-acre Trumansburg spot. The moral of the story that I really want to share with you is, for those of you that know this channel, you know that there were no initial measurements or design that influenced all of this layout. And it feels like a pretty thoughtful and functional way of managing water, pulse moments of excess water, scrubbing for nutrient, diverting excess water. But you can believe me if you'd like, I hope you would, that there was no grand design. There was no formal education to get there. There were no special tools. It was all just coming out with a shovel when there's this sort of scenario. There's a huge rain, there's a huge thaw. Let's adjust, let's shape the water. And so for those of you that have landscapes that can have incredibly wet moments, incredibly dry moments, and you want to work with that water, I hope you give yourself permission to get out there and just start trying. And over 8 years of chipping away at this, it's actually become a really functional landscape that performs well even when there's 2 inches of rain in 12 hours on top of a foot of snow. I'm really pleased with how little erosion there was and how much nutrients just kind of moving, storing how I'd like it to. So if you want to see more details of this stuff, let me know. I can do some 20-minute, 30-minute wanders, but I'll put on gloves that time. Anyway, thanks for watching.